God's Servant, the third installment of Curriculum of Grace, a series of articles chronicling God's pursuit of a young man impervious to the teaching of elders. In all my days at Groton, the all-boys Christian school my parents sent me to at age 13, I can remember very few hours when I didn't feel an underlying unease. Many years would pass before I could say with confidence where that unease came from. God did not create the unease, but he used it to pry me loose from a vision of myself that would have led to great sadness. To accomplish that, he made use of his servant, the Reverend Charles Sheerin. Mr. Sheerin, a native Virginian, was a Groton graduate who had come back to the school to teach English literature and to serve as chaplain, an ambiguous role which combined the duties of associate pastor and school counselor. Listening to him in class and in chapel, I sensed something I felt too, an inchoate yearning for something unnameable. Today I would describe it as a yearning for Christ, but at the time I thought of it as a yearning for something more real and human than the school and the society it was preparing us for. Sheerin's southern accent was exotic to my 13-year-old ears. It conveyed a warmth and an empathy that I didn't find elsewhere at that chilly New England boarding school, where everyone seemed to be telling us to buck up, buckle down, do our duty, and in every possible way embrace the role God or the school had assigned us to play. When we read Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn, he talked about his wife, sitting with her on a Christmas Eve, tree trimmed, children both in bed, a last tranquil moment before the early morning chaos of gifts and wrapping paper. Heard memories are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, ye sweet pipes, play on. The image of contented love encoded in a frieze on ancient pottery thrilled my adolescent heart. No other master favored us with casual asides like this. I hoarded them against the chill wind of striving and propriety. It helped that Sheerin was a bit of a rebel. Though he was then in his late 30s, with a young wife and 2 little girls at home, an adolescent insouciance and mischief still clung to him. He was not above taking risks for his own and our entertainment. The day after the headmaster announced his retirement, he conversed in a low voice with a colleague in study hall, then confided that he had planted a rumor that a Catholic was about to be picked as the next headmaster. Let's see how long that takes to get back to me. Not long, as it turned out. As study hall ended, an elderly classicist tottered up to the master's desk and whispered furiously into Sheerin's ear. The image of Sheerin's triumphant grin stuck in my mind all through the next class. Sheerin's audacity sounded a little different when it came from the pulpit. His sermons had a censorious edge to them, and when he spoke about wealth and comfort and self-satisfaction, I would glance at the grim faces of older masters in their assigned pews, wondering if it was their attitudes Sheerin's warnings were aimed at. As a child, I'd been ambitious, and because of my success, a bit haughty. At Groton, though, I began to question where a life of academic success would lead me. I didn't directly discuss these misgivings with Sheerin even after he became my advisor at the start of junior year. I did, however, write them out in the form of a short story, which I submitted in his English class. The story described an evening with my father, who took me out to dinner at a famous and expensive Boston restaurant with a few of his friends to celebrate my winning some academic award or other. My heart swelled with pride, but then I wondered about the next award and the next after that. Where did they lead? What lay at the end of the road? And if I reached a point in my life where there were no more awards to be won, what would I have achieved, and what would I do with the rest of my life? Is it a fair measure of Charles Sheerin's understanding of the faith that he didn't acknowledge the applied question, what is worth giving your life for, but responded instead with a very few brief words of praise? Now that so many years later I am living for Christ, I can't imagine not pressing further if a 16-year-old shared that story, especially if I bore the responsibilities of counselor, pastor, and teacher. At the time, though, I did not think his comment odd, but stored up the praise in my heart, confirmation that I was at least asking questions Mr. Sheerin thought were important. It was a relief to have put my deepest worries on paper, and I couldn't help but take comfort in my teacher's enthusiasm, even though I now know answers would have been better. Looking back, I suspect that although Mr. Sheerin had committed his life to Christ, he was as confused in his late 30s as I was at 16 about where life was leading him. Though he cast himself as an outsider, he was in truth the ultimate insider at Groton, a graduate, pillar of the school, Episcopal minister and son of a minister, yet somehow he knew he was not where he should be. God used him to lead me by example, if not by words, to acknowledge the truth of what in my mid-teens I was just beginning to feel, that I too was not where I should be. God has never been shy about giving my life a jolt when I needed one. He blessed me beyond measure in sending me, in Mr. Sheerin, a guide whose homely confidences I cherished, and whose teaching offered a ray of hope that ultimately pointed to the gospel.